This video is sponsored by Epidemic Sound. More on them later. I am so sick and tired of you not following your dreams to learn text animation inside DaVinci Resolve. So today we are going from Meatball to Meatball Graduate and covering everything you could ever want to know inside DaVinci Resolve regarding text animation. By the end of this video, you will be able to teach a course and sell it for multi-millions. And when you do, give me some commission. All right, Fusion is better than After Effects. Let's go ahead and hop straight into it. And stage one of the Meatball process starts right here on the edit page, and we have to make a very important decision. Where do we start? Well, that's gonna live up top here in the Effects tab. If you don't see this tab for some reason, make sure it's open, and we're gonna look underneath our toolbox for the titles section. And here's where we have to make some big decisions. Which title do we start with? Well, my little eggs, there are lots of options. You could go with the text, you can go with one of these pre-built-in titles, but for us, I want you to get used to using a text plus title. There's nothing wrong with using something like the multi-text, but for us to become comfortable inside DaVinci Resolve and Fusion, we're gonna use text plus. So go ahead and drag and drop one of those in. Let's go ahead and zoom in on our text plus title right here. Now we're gonna cover font and aesthetic choices in just a little bit, but we need to get started animating. And if you're brand new to DaVinci Resolve and brand new to the idea of animation, that's gonna be this icon right over here. These are keyframes. What is a keyframe? Say it with me now. All a keyframe does is indicate change. Meaning that if I were to go to the beginning of my timeline and set a keyframe for the size property and go to the end of that clip and set another keyframe for size, well, as is, nothing changes, but that's because I didn't change the property. If though I go to the end of the clip and I decrease our property here, you'll see now that it changes over time. And if you've followed along, congrats, you've just made your first animation. Now it is gonna be important where you set your keyframes because, for example, if I were to bring my playhead randomly on the text footage and change our size property, well, you notice that it introduces a new keyframe here. So now if I were to play this, we're gonna go big and then small. To quickly navigate to where your keyframes are located, there is an arrow icon right next to that keyframe icon. So I can hit that and I will bounce back and forth between my various keyframe locations. And if you would like to get rid of a keyframe, all you have to do is go to that location and uncheck it. And to get rid of all of the keyframes on a particular property, you can either go up to the upper right-hand corner and hit this reset icon or double click the property itself, and that'll reset everything back to the beginning. So let's set up our first animation. And the one that we're gonna do is a simple pop. And before we set our keyframes, one thing that I am gonna call out right now is that I am on a 1080p 30 FPS timeline. Does that frame rate matter for you? No, your frame rate should fit whatever your project frame rate is supposed to be, but you might need to scale and change the timings of things appropriate to your timeline. And for relatively quick animations, I like to work in tenths of that frame rate. So every 3 frames for us. So what I'm gonna do is this. I'm gonna set a keyframe at the very beginning. Using my right arrow key, I'm gonna go over 1, 2, 3 frames, set another keyframe. And then for the end of our animation, I'm gonna go over 3 frames again. So right arrow key, 1, 2, 3, hit that keyframe. And for us to create our popping animation, what I'm gonna do is this. I'm gonna click the left arrow here to bounce all the way back to the beginning of our animation, and I'm gonna set the size down to, you could go 0, or you could go something like 0.04. I'm gonna go over to the next keyframe here. This time we'll change the size to be a little bit bigger, so let's do maybe 0.1. And then this ending size, I'm gonna leave alone. And now when I play this, whoop, we've got a pretty aggressive pop animation. Should you copy my numbers exactly? Well, I don't know. Should you? Does it make sense for you to copy these numbers? Remember, we're trying to get smart inside DaVinci Resolve. So time for you to start making some educated decisions. For me, this might feel a bit aggressive, so I might go back to that middle keyframe and change the bigger size to be 0.09. And that'll make things a little bit more subtle. I can even go back to that first keyframe and make it something like 0.07. So now we have something much more subtle. And that right there is keyframing in the nutshell. But if you're like me, that's not good enough for you. And so in order for us to level up, we're gonna have to use Now, last time we did some leveling up, I did some costume changes, which is just ridiculous. But you know what's not ridiculous? Fusion.
Hell yeah.
If you came into this video hoping to not use Fusion, I have bad news for you, but I also have really good news because Fusion is really good. Listen, I know Fusion can be a very scary place for a lot of people, but if you don't get comfortable using it inside DaVinci Resolve, you're kind of like wasting half of your brain, which is how I grew up. And do you really want to be like me? Now, some of you might already be typing a comment that says, well, can't we edit splines on the edit page? Wrong, buckaroo, unless they fix it, and then I'm gonna look dumb. If you're more comfortable with DaVinci Resolve, they've actually added a keyframe manager to the edit page. But unfortunately, the properties we're keyframing or we're changing aren't linked to the video, they're linked to the text. So no matter how much you scrub around and look in here, you won't be able to find the size property of our text. So to fix that, we've got to go into... To hop into the Fusion page, there's two ways of going about it. One, you can either hover your playhead over whatever clip you'd like to go into the Fusion page on and hit the magic wand icon, or right click, hit open in Fusion. And because we do this so much, we have ours mapped to the X key. And it is at this moment that we lose about half of our audience to the intimidation that is nodes, splines, and the Fusion workspace. Right down here in the bottom is our node workspace. This is where we make all of our fun changes to nodes. Our text plus node is represented by this template node. When we click on this node, we'll see all the same options we had on the edit page. In Fusion, all roads lead to the media out node. So any change we make on our template node gets fed to the media out, and that's what we see on the edit page. Anything that we decide to put in between point A and point B will affect what we see. And that's it. That's the only thing you need to know about Fusion. We're going to cover everything as we go along. The only other thing I'll call out is that by default, you're split into two preview windows. I like to work with just one. So I'm going to go up to this upper right-hand corner, click this viewer button. Now we're working with one icon. Now, when I go and I select my template node here, or our text plus template node, you'll see we still have our size property keyframed, which is great. Now I'm going to ask us to start using our spline menu. If yours isn't already open, go up to the upper right-hand corner and click the spline option. I'm going to go ahead and condense this to fit, and I'm going to check on our size property, so that way it's showing. There's a couple important things to know about the spline menu. For one, go to this upper right-hand corner, click the three dots, and hit Show Only Selected Tool. As we begin to progress, if we don't have this turned on, this will list every possible node and option that we can mess with when it comes to splining our curves. The other button that's kind of fun to use is right next to it. It's these two arrows right here. This is our Zoom to Fit button. When I click that, it will resize our graph so that we can see our keyframe property. You'll notice something that might be a bit obvious to you here, in that our lines are straight. By default, when we keyframe anything inside DaVinci Resolve, it will be a linear change. If you didn't like math in school, all that means is constant. We're gonna have a constant change in that property from point A to B, which is what we're seeing in our graph here. There's no variation, there's no acceleration or deceleration, which makes it feel pretty jagged. And because we're in Fusion, there's a very simple fix to that. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and expand this a little bit, so I've got a little bit more real estate to play with. You can either drag and select all your keyframes here, or the shortcut is Control plus A, and that'll select all your keyframes. Now there's two really useful smoothing operations in the spline menu. One is if we hit F. F is flatten. It flattens our handles to be perfectly horizontal, and that's gonna look something like this. Now for this animation, it might be a little bit hard to see the difference because it's happening so quickly, but I promise there is a difference. And if you bear with me, I will show you what it looks like. The other thing that we can do is, again, hit Control A to select all of our points and hit S. S smooths out our curve, or it looks to make the handles perfectly perpendicular to the motion of the graph. So what's something that we can do to exaggerate our pop animation? Well, that's such a great question. That's why I'm so glad you're here. Watch this. Using Control in the scroll wheel, or Command if you're on Mac, I'm going to zoom out on our spline graph. And then again, we can drag and highlight to select, or Control A. And then down at the bottom of our spline menu, there's a couple of icons that are very handy. One of them is what we just did. We smoothed out our graph, and the other is our linear line, which straightens them. Let me go ahead and smooth that back out. One of the most useful ones is this guy right here. This is our time stretch option. When I click that on, we get these two vertical lines. This will stretch our animation while keeping the proportionality of the curve the same. A lot of words, let me show you what I mean. I'm gonna bring my playhead to the 15 frame mark. 15 frames on our timeline is still just half a second, right? 15 divided by 30. By holding down the middle mouse button in my spline graph, I can pan over here, and I'm gonna grab this right edge and extend it out. And you'll notice that it shifts the middle point while keeping the relationship of the entire animation. If I play this now, it's gonna look something like this. A little bit slower, right? Let me uncheck that option and go back to our graph. And I'm gonna hit the zoom to fit to resize everything. Now, if we're gonna be looking to make a more accurate pop animation, well, the beginning isn't quite right because we start out slow, go fast, slow down at the peak, go fast, slow down at the end. Well, I need this to start up a little bit faster. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drag this point down here and pull the handle up. And now we have a little bit of wonkiness here. Well, if I just grab this handle and push it up like that, now we have a fun little pop animation. And I think that doesn't look half bad. The only other thing that I would do is I would go over to my settings tab and turn on motion blur. Again, that's with my template node selected. I went over to the settings tab and turned on motion blur, and that looks something like this. If I were to zoom in here, the quality is the number of copies of the motion blur, and the shutter angle changes the amount of motion blur. That looks something like that. I think we're ready to advance. For this next stage, we're gonna jump into the deep end a little bit. The concepts that we just talked about when it comes to keyframing and splining your size, we could do with any property. So if I wanted an out animation, I could go to the end and go in a couple of frames, go over to the layout property, set a keyframe on the center position, go to the end of the composition, and drag it down until it's out of frame. And now we have this out animation. Again, we could smooth this out by going to our spline, zooming to fit. I can uncheck the size property now, zoom to fit. And then here's a really cool trick for you guys. I can hit Control A, right click, and then if I go to the ease menu, we have a bunch of preset animation easing options. So if you're looking for some help when it comes to smoothing out your graphs, start here. And the one that I'm gonna check on here is in cubic. And that's gonna slowly accelerate our animation out. And that's gonna look something like this. Now, an elephant in the room that we haven't addressed yet is style. You see, text animation and typography is a whole field in itself, and people dedicate their whole lives to just making this stuff look good. So how do we start making our stuff good? Well, one of those decisions that we need to make is font choice. And again, font is a science in itself. If you need resources for free fonts, there is DaFont, everybody's go-to choice for free fonts. There's also sites like Google Fonts where you can go and find commercially free fonts from Google. If you get creative and start snooping around, you will find lots of very cool resources when it comes to picking fonts like Fontshare. Fontshare is a cool website that looks to pair font families together. It's a limited selection, but the selection you get is good. The thing to know about fonts is they're okay to use in your edits, but do not try to sell merchandise unless you pay for the font. That's a different ball game. Don't try to sell fonts to people. If you download a font and you're not sure what file to use, default to either TTF or .otf. It really doesn't matter for us. Just use .otf if you need somebody to make a decision for you. So let's go ahead and pick a font for us to use. I'm gonna go over to my text here, and I'm gonna reset our node. I like us to all start on a blank slate where the size and the layout isn't keyframed. So to do that, I'm gonna go to the upper right-hand corner and click that. And the font that I'm gonna use is off of Google Fonts, and it's called Josephine Sans. I just like the look of this one. Let's go ahead and type in some text. It doesn't matter what we type in. I'm just gonna type in hello there. So now that we've learned keyframes and we know how to spline, it's time to introduce. The modifiers are the Fusion Page's advanced settings. They introduce a new set of options that allow for more complicated animations. So check this out. What I want you to do is with your template node selected, I'd like you to click in the text entry field, not on a property, not on the title, in the entry field itself, right click. And here we have a list of modifiers. Now, like I said, modifiers are advanced options inside DaVinci Resolve. The one that we're gonna play with is the follower modifier. Go ahead and select that. And at first, nothing changes. But if we look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see we've unlocked this new tab, the modifier tab. Go ahead and select that. And here we can see our follower modifier. The follower modifier does what it sounds like. It creates a delay and it allows for our animations to follow one another. So you'll notice that we have a couple options here for what that delay looks like. For right now, we're not gonna see that because we don't have any animation, right? If I scrub my playhead, nothing is changing. So let's go ahead and do that. I want you to go over to the Transform tab. And in the Transform tab, what we're gonna animate is the rotation and the position. So for me, I'm gonna go forward 15 frames. So it's about half of my frame rate. I'm gonna set a keyframe on the Z rotation and the character offset. Now, whenever you keyframe a position property, it's gonna generate this path that the position follows. We don't need to worry about that. Just go ahead and click back up top to the follower property. And now we can go back to the beginning of our composition. And what I'd like us to do is bring the offset down to somewhere to let's go minus 0.125. And we're gonna change the rotation to be right around, let's go minus 130. Do you have to use the exact numbers? No, but I tend to find that this looks pretty good. And now when we scrub forward, the letters rotate up into place. Now again, we're not seeing any variation yet, but that's because we haven't introduced delay. So if I go over to the timings tab and I add a 1 frame delay, now when I scrub forward, each letter follows after the next. Now this is not a bad starting point, but we can definitely make this better. To do that, we're gonna do three things, maybe 2 to 3 things. With our spline menu open and our template node selected, let's go ahead and zoom to fit on these 2 properties. What I'd like you to do is hit Control A to select these 2 nodes. And we're not gonna hit F or S. What we're gonna do is use that easing menu. So I'm gonna right click, go to ease, then go to Outback Cubic. When I select that, what the Outback Cubic curve does is overshoot our animation and then recede back in. So that's gonna look something like this. Each letter is gonna go past its rotation and landing point and then come back into place, just like that. Now that's looking not half bad, but the starting point of our animation looks, looks a little bit wonky. To fix that, we can either choose to mask our animation, but we're gonna hold off on doing that for now. What I am gonna suggest doing is turning off the opacity. So I'm gonna go over to the Shading tab. Again, I'm still on the Modifier tab of our template node. It's gonna be very important that you don't accidentally go over to the Tools tab because the Tool tab isn't seeing what we're doing over here in the modifier. So again, it's kind of easy to get lost between tools, modifiers. But if we want something to have the follower or the delay modifier attached to it, then we need to make sure we're over in that modifier tab. All I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over to frame 15, set a keyframe on the opacity, go back to the beginning, set a keyframe. And in fact, I'm gonna change the opacity at the beginning to 0. And now when I hit play, the letters appear on screen. If you would like to, we can go to our template node and turn off everything except the opacity. Zoom to fit. And you can set up the spline here to be however you would like, whatever floats your boat. I'm gonna go ahead and hit Control A to select everything, F to flatten, and then I'm just gonna bring up this handle so that we kind of accelerate in with the opacity. And now we have a very nice and convenient whip up animation. We can add a gear clicking sound to really sell the text motion. And if you're curious about where I got this sound effect or any of the other music used in this video, those are provided by today's sponsor, Epidemic. Before you skip ahead, hear me out. In every edit, even if it's just with text animations, there is a moment where you struggle to make decisions based on the audio. And year after year, I continue to recommend Epidemic Sound as the best soundtracking platform for every editor and creator. Every music track and sound effect is restriction-free, which means you don't have to worry about copyright claims. In this new age of AI, Epidemic's goal is to integrate those technologies that empower human creativities. So for example, they have a new tool called Adapt that allows you to remix tracks, and at the same time, the original artist will still get paid. They also have a new AI-powered sound tracking sidekick called Assistant to help you locate the audio you need. One of the most difficult parts of any edit is finding the right music, and you can chat with Assistant, which is trained on Epidemic Sound Catalog to get inspiration and music suggestions quickly. Just express what you're looking for, and Assistant will give you creative directions to explore. I highly encourage you to check out the link in the description because right now they are running a Cyber Week special where you can get 50% off on a yearly creator or pro plan when using the code WAMPUS50. Now, there are an unlimited amount of directions we could go in with text animations. There's some great resources on either Dribbble, which is spelled with 3 B's, or Behance. I'll put a Behance link in the description with some more common styles and effects that you can try to emulate. And I'm always guilty for recommending PeeJ and his animations because I think they are simple, effective, and look really good. I may or may not also have an affiliate link there. Now, from here, I gotta be honest, gang, it's not gonna get better. You see, if we're gonna look to level up our text animations to beyond just the basics, we have to get real dirty and nasty inside of Fusion. So what I'm gonna attempt to do is create a title sequence that kind of combines everything into one so that down the road, when you wanna make your own version, you can do so. So check this out, check this out, check this out. Real quick, before I forget, if I go back over to the modifiers tab, there are some really cool settings that you can play with here to give different effects. One of them is changing the order. And so you can change this from automatic to something like completely random. And now the letters will animate in randomly. Another really cool feature is if we go over the transform tab, there's this very top drop-down menu that says characters. Well, if we go over to words, this will allow you to enable the follower modifier, but do it word by word instead of letter by letter. Remember, if the question is, can I do this in Fusion? The answer is yes. You just might need to figure out where that button lives. But let's go ahead and go back to the edit page and let's start fresh. So remember, effects tab, titles, and we want text plus, not text, text plus. Go ahead and drag and drop one in. Now, if yours is a different starting length than mine, do not stress it. It is all going to work the same. And let's go ahead and hop back into Fusion. If our playhead is above the text, we can either click the magic wand or right click, open in Fusion. We click the middle mouse button to recenter our notes real quick, and let's type in some sample text. And I'm gonna go ahead and reset our font again to Josephine Sands. And there we go. Alrighty, here we go. We are going to incorporate some of the more common text animation effects in this one title. There's a lot to cover, so we are gonna move quickly. Let's show off one of the other modifiers. If I go over to the text entry field with my template notes selected, and I right click, we started with the follower modifier, but let's go to the character level styling modifier, CLS. When we do that, again, nothing happens, but we unlock that handy dandy modifiers tab. So let's go ahead and click it. And this one looks a little bit different than the follower modifier. What the character level styling does is modify things at the character level. So if I drag and select one of these words here, I can change the color, I can change the font, we can change the size, how it's offset, etc. Any property that you can think of changing for a text, you can do it at a character level, which means you don't have to do it for a word. I can just drag and select a single letter and modify one letter. Now, the character level styling modifier is a weird one to get used to, but if you're trying to be more specific with how each letter or word animates in, this is where that's gonna live. Let me reset that real quick. And I'm gonna go back to that text tab on the character level styling modifier. So I'm gonna have us do two things on this modifier. For one, select the last word or the last few letters of whatever you got typed up, and let's just change the color. So I'm gonna go over to the color tab here. And I'm gonna go with, I kind of like a nice yellow orange, somewhere in that gold range, and hit okay. Now the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna animate just this word, and we're gonna do it using this keyframeable property down here. One of the things that makes the character level styling modifier a bit weird is that there's no keyframes next to the different properties. So no matter what tab I go to, you'll see that none of them have keyframeable items. Well, if I go back to that text tab, this keyframe right here, this single one, controls every single property. So if I were to check it on and I'm on frame 0, anything that we change here will be keyframed. So it could be the size, it could be the transform tab, shading, it does not matter. Which is one of the reasons why I say this modifier can get strange quickly. If you haven't already, go ahead and turn on this keyframe on frame 0. I'm gonna hit the right arrow to move one frame forward, and I'm just gonna change the font. So now if I were to hit the left arrow and cycle back and forth, our font changes on just this word over here. So what we're gonna go ahead and do is go forward one frame and then cycle to a new font. And we're gonna go ahead and do this for, I don't know, it really depends on how motivated you are and how long you want this effect to play out. It is completely up to you, but again, I'm just gonna go forward 1 frame and pick a font. But I went ahead and did 12 frames. Do you have to do 12? Of course not, but we're gonna go ahead and stick with 12 frames. Now it's time to venture into unknown territory because we're gonna use... Now, nodes in Fusion might still be scary for you guys, but just remember that anything that we put in between our template node and the media out node affects our text. Order will matter, and if you ever get confused, just follow the arrow. The template node is sending out information to the media out, and the media out is what gets displayed. And the first one that I'm gonna have you add on is a simple transform node. So go ahead and hit Control Space and look for a transform node. There's a few options here, but I would prefer if you use the one with XF in the parentheses. Why this one as opposed to the others? This one just tends to be a little bit more forgiving. Go ahead and hit Add. Now, a transform node does exactly what it sounds like. If I were to click on that node, we're able to change the center position, the size, the angle, etc. But you'll notice it's not changing our text as is. Well, if you're not new to Fusion, you know why. But if you are completely brand new, that's because our text isn't in our pipeline here. It's not being fed any information, so it can't change anything. To fix that, we can either unconnect our node here, feed it in here, and then go output here. Or if I were gonna hit Control Z a couple times, I can hold down the Shift key, hover my mouse until it's above the line. You have to make sure the mouse is on the line itself. It can't just be kind of around it, and release. And when I do that, it inserts our node into this pipeline. Now my node snapped to the grid because I have a certain setting turned on. If I right click in the workspace, go to Arrange Tools, I have 2 grid turned on, and that makes it so it snaps in the node workspace. Let me go ahead and reset our transform node. A question you might have is, dude, why aren't we just using the template node? There's a layout tab right here and we can change the center position. Totally valid. You can do that. Nothing wrong with that. But a habit I do encourage you to get into is to split up your animations into separate nodes. If you begin to make things more modular, down the road when it comes time to fix things and troubleshoot, life becomes a lot easier. And if we set up this transform node once, one of the best parts of Fusion is that I can take this node and put it on any animation. See what I mean? We're gonna get smart, guys. So let's go ahead and animate our position, which we've done a few times now. Go over to frame 15, set the keyframe, and then go back to the beginning. So it's 15 and 0 and set a keyframe. Let's go ahead and go back to the beginning of our composition. And all I want us to do is on the X position of our center property, with my left mouse button, I'm gonna drag and pull this out of frame. So that way, it slides in. With our spline menu open, let's go ahead and zoom to fit. Control A to select the 2 nodes, F is to flatten, and I'm gonna grab this bottom handle and pull her up. So that way we are accelerating into place. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over to the settings tab and turn on the motion blur. Let's go ahead and crank up that quality to 10. And now when we slide in, we've got some nice blur and then it comes to rest. Hopefully this concept has been somewhat comfortable because the next thing that we're gonna do is strange. You see, a common question I get if I'm on the edit page is, how do I make my animations last the entire length? So when you go about editing, you're gonna have text that might be 5 seconds long, it might be a second long, it might be 10 seconds long, but you want the animations to last the entire length without having to change keyframes. If I hop back into Fusion, there are actually a lot of ways of doing this. And if you do want to learn more, one of the things I would highly encourage you to look up are anim curves. So if I right click on any of these properties, go to modify width, you know, we play with the follower and the character level styling. Well, there's a lot of other modifiers, and one of the most powerful is called anim curves. We're not gonna cover it today, but I do encourage you to look it up. What we are gonna talk about is the keyframe stretcher, which is a node that is very common with title animations. With our transform node selected, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create an out animation. Just like how we did in one of the first examples where the text falls down at the end, we're gonna have our text continue to slide off to the right. So I'm gonna go over to frame 20. The exactness of this does not matter, but it is important that we create some space between our in animation, where our text is sliding in, and where it's sliding out. Now, the thing that we're gonna do different this time is we're not gonna start at the end. We're just gonna start at some point in the middle, and then the keyframe stretcher is gonna take over and push this out animation to the end. This might be uncomfortable, but if you made it to this point in the video, you know you've accepted your fate. On frame 20, go ahead and set another keyframe on the center position of our transform node. And I'm gonna go forward 10 frames. So it would be frame 30 for me. And then I'm gonna slide our center position out of frame. I'm gonna go to the spline menu, zoom to fit, select these 2 frames, F to flatten, and I'm gonna drag this bottom one down. So we've got a nice S curve in our spline. And now our text slides into frame, holds for a second, and then slides out of frame. And at full speed, that looks something like this. And now I'd like you to make a note of where these keyframes are at. We have a keyframe at 30, 20, 15, and 0. Let's go ahead and add in another node. I'm gonna hit Control Space. And this time we're gonna look for the keyframe stretcher. Go ahead and add that in. What a keyframe stretcher node does is exactly what it says. It stretches our animation. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna look for these ending keyframes and attempt to push it to the end of our composition every single time. We just have to tell it where to look for this final animation and where the gap is, where our first one ends and where our second one begins. So with our keyframe stretcher selected, it's asking, hey, where does this start? Well, for us, it starts at frame 0. Next, it's asking, well, where does it end? Well, for us, it actually is gonna end on frame 31. The frame after our final keyframe is when there's no more keyframes. If you do 30, it's gonna fall 1 frame short, so we're gonna go 31. And this next part can be a little bit weird for some folks, but it's asking, where's the gap? Where should we look to stretch the animation? Well, our first animation ended on frame 15, which means that we should start the stretch on frame 16. Now we've set the end point of our in animation, and the beginning point of our out animation is frame 20. And now if I hold the shift key to insert our keyframe stretcher onto our pipeline, what's gonna happen is this ending animation will not start until I get to the very end of our composition. So as I scrub forward, there we go. And now we can see our ending animation. Now, when I go back to the edit page, I can extend this text clip to be as long as I want. And no matter what, we will have an ending animation as soon as I pull our clip to the end. And now if I were to duplicate our text here, we're gonna have the same animation over and over. Couple things to note with the keyframe stretcher node. One, if you're gonna use this, your text has to be as long as the animation, meaning that our animation was at least 30 frames long. So if I make this text clip less than 30 frames, well, we're not gonna get the out animation because it doesn't see it. The other area that you can break this effect is if you cut your text animation. So if I cut it here, it's gonna break it because you're breaking that keyframe stretcher chain. There is a solution to this, but it is pretty advanced and I made a separate video on it here. With that said, the last thing I would do with text like this is apply our look. So if I go back into the Fusion page, I'll pull our media out just a little bit and push our keyframe stretch to the end over here. A very common look with text like this is to add a glow, and you could add any kind of glow. So if I were to hit Control Space and look up glow, I've got a lot of options because I've added a bunch over the years. But if you wanted to just use the normal glows or the soft glow, you could totally do that. The one I like to recommend is called DreamGlow, and it's from a creator by the name of Skape. Skape has continued to iterate on this tool, but as of right now, it's still free and it is absolutely incredible. I'll hold Shift and drag and insert it in here. Next thing I would do is probably add in some grain. Again, any of these grains would work. Pick your favorite. And I'm gonna decrease the power or strength on mine a good bit. The last node I would add would be a stop motion node. Now, stop motion nodes artificially lower the frame rate by repeating frames. So when I add this, what it's gonna do is make our animation feel a bit more chunky. And if I change the frame repeat option to 2, it will repeat every second frame. So now we have something that feels a little bit more hand animated. And when I go back to the edit page, that's gonna look something like this. Before you click off the video, there's one final step that is so important. Now that we've spent all this time learning how to do this and we've set it up to animate, let's save it. I have an entire video dedicated to all the different ways we can save our text animations, but one of the easiest and one of the simplest is to just go to your media pool and drag and drop it in. And now when I go to my media pool and I drag this effect down, we have our animation ready to go. And because we use the Text Plus node and because we set things up properly, I can change this to be whatever I'd like. but it will break it. You see how we lose the yellow part of our text here? That's because the character level styling was only applied to that last word. So how do we fix that? Well, that is a conversation for a different time in a different video. If you guys want an advanced text animation video, please let me know. But I do hope this helps you guys get started on your Fusion and editing journeys. And until next time, I'll catch you later. Peace.